I wouldn't say it's super realistic. What's up guys, this is Adam here with Turtle Guard Tournaments, and I am here to review Jiu-Jitsu used in movie fight scenes. Now, I'm not going to be watching any MMA movies like Warrior or anything like that, simply because those movies, there's no reason they shouldn't have Jiu-Jitsu in them. But your average action movie that has fight scenes in it, a lot of times they don't have Jiu-Jitsu in them just because Jiu-Jitsu is not it's not as aesthetically pleasing, it's not as visually amazing to look at. But there are some fight scenes out there in movies that do incorporate some jiu-jitsu. Sometimes it's pretty good, sometimes it's not so good, but it's definitely fun to see it when it happens. Again, my name is Adam Gonzalez. I've been doing jiu-jitsu for over 17 years. I am a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-jitsu. So for all intents and purposes, I am an expert in the martial art, and I'll be using that expertise to rate the fight scenes in these movies. So let's get started.
This isn't a mud hole. It's an operating table. And I'm the surgeon.
Nice. All right, so Batman, what he does is he basically body locks the dude, picks him up, slams him to the ground. A very aggressive wrestling technique to get somebody to the ground. And immediately he goes to side control and he locks up an arm bar. Looks like he's trash talking the dude too while he's doing it. This arm bar right here, what happens is you get the arm and you lock it up between your legs and you extend it. The whole point of an arm bar is to take the arm, fully extend it, and basically start bending it in the way that it's not supposed to bend. So straight, and then getting that elbow to either dislocate, pop, or hyperextend or whatever. Okay, so that's what he has him locked up in right at this moment. Nice. As you can see, the guy was screaming in pain when he was caught in that arm bar, but he didn't want to stop there. So then all of a sudden, it cuts to him in a full-on mount, throwing a few punches, and then he turns towards the legs and he locks up what's called a knee bar. So it's kind of like an arm bar, except instead of locking up the arm, you're locking up the leg, you're extending the leg and straightening and bending the leg the way it's not supposed to, which is much more vicious than a regular arm bar. Yeah, you can tell that guy covered his eyes. He doesn't want to see that. Ooh, he messed that dude up bad. So after he went for that knee bar, he probably just locked up those submissions simply to hurt him, to make him feel as much pain as possible. And then he went straight to full mount, and then he just started raining down punches. Full mount is a very dominant position in jiu-jitsu. Even though we don't work strikes, we do work a lot of positioning. And the reason being is if you ever need to use jiu-jitsu in a self-defense scenario, these positions are extremely advantageous if you are going to be raining down strikes. Definitely his punches on top are going to hurt a lot more than the person's punches from bottom. So this is definitely a great position to be in a self-defense street fight scenario. So as far as like the rating, I would probably give it a good maybe like 9 out of 10. You know, it was really clean. He did a nice takedown. He went for an arm bar, he went for a knee bar, and the setups were pretty decent. As far as, you know, it's surprising because, you know, it's a cartoon, and then he takes that top position and just rains down punches. So Bruce Lee here, you know, he picks up a single leg and then he twists the leg, getting the guy to flip over. It's usually not as easy as that. He made it look really easy. Picking up the leg was a good idea, and you could twist it, but, you know, the guy spinning like that, that's definitely movie theatrics right there. But I mean, it's pretty cool. I like the getup that they're wearing. They're basically wearing MMA gloves. And remember, this movie came out way before the UFC. So I mean, it's pretty cool to see Bruce Lee repping what looks like modern MMA gear. Now these takedowns that he's doing, they look pretty cool. You know, they're very fun to watch. Him flipping the dude over and over. But I will say that they're not the most realistic takedowns. They look very similar to throws that you're going to see in Aikido. And, you know, no disrespect to anybody who trains Aikido, but Aikido hasn't been proven to be the most realistic martial art with its takedowns. If you want to take somebody down, you really want to use more throws and takedowns that are more incorporated from judo or wrestling, and even your basic jiu-jitsu takedowns are going to be more effective than, you know, these flips that are going on right here. But they look nice, but as far as realistic, they're not super realistic. Oof, nice. So what happened is, you know, the guy, he goes to his hands and knees, and that's called a turtle position in jiu-jitsu. And what Bruce Lee did is he locked up his the guy's left arm with his legs, and now he locked up his right arm with his arms and got him in a sort of crucifix position. The guy definitely made it worse by flipping himself upside down and stacking himself. You know, that's definitely not going to make the position more comfortable. And as you can tell, Bruce Lee is straightening out the arm into sort of an armbar position, using just his arms to lock it up and straighten it out. And now the guy's tapping out. It can be it's a little bit confusing as to what he's tapping out to, because in the cut scene right before that, the arm was very straight, so you could say that he's hitting an arm bar. But when he's tapping out right there, his elbow is clearly bent a little bit, which means it's not super straight, which means it's not hyperextending, it's not breaking. So he could be tapping out just so the general discomfort of the position. He doesn't want to be there anymore. Maybe he's in, you know, pain being there or whatever. But it looks like, you know, Bruce Lee's setting up a sort of an arm bar. I wouldn't say that it's the best arm bar. It's not the most technical arm bar. There's definitely better ways to lock up the arm bar from that position. But as far as like the realism of the grappling and jiu-jitsu, I would probably give it maybe like a 6. So that was actually a pretty nice setup. Green Arrow was getting his butt whooped by that random thug, which that kind of sucks because he's a superhero. You know, if he's getting pieced up by a random thug, he's got to really step it up when he encounters the big villains or whatever. But he was getting beat up on his feet, so he shoots in for a double leg takedown. Shoots in, grabs the legs, boom! Hits a nice double leg takedown, and then immediately lands in a kind of side control, and he starts locking up what's called a reverse arm bar, where he basically hugs the arm, locks it up backwards, and starts straightening it out. And then he uses that to spin into a regular arm bar. So it's actually a pretty clean setup. I liked it a lot. And he's trying to straighten it out right now. As you can tell, the guy is actually locking his fingers together because he knows he's caught in an arm bar. If he lets his hands get spread apart, that arm's gonna get straightened out, and he's gonna start getting tapped out, or, you know, in this case, he's gonna start getting his arm stretched out, hyperextended, broken in that position. So he definitely doesn't want it to happen. So he got the hands to come apart, and he's hitting a pretty nice arm bar, and the guy actually bites the leg to get out of the arm bar. It's not the most, you know, clean way of getting out of submission, but I mean, it could happen. I will say it's not that realistic to bite him and Green Arrow actually let go when he has what looks like a big leather boot on. I mean, I don't know how strong this guy's mouth is and how sharp his teeth are, but, you know, it would have to be pretty freaking strong in order to bite a leather boot and it actually hurt the person more than the armbar that he's applying to him. I definitely think the armbar should have trumped that bite on the leg. But as far as the quality of jiu-jitsu, it's pretty awesome. I'd probably give it like an 8. It's pretty close to the Batman scene. The only reason I'd take a point off is just because of that bite. I don't think that bite would have hurt him enough to make him let go of that armbar. Alright, so Ryan Reynolds is getting his ass beat by Triple H. You know, Triple H is laying down the punches from basically side control, right? So Ryan Reynolds throws up an armbar. It's not the It's not the cleanest looking armbar. It's a little bit sloppy, but he does manage to kind of fix it along the way and turn it into a decent looking armbar. And then he actually rotates and turns it into a position called the omoplata. Now the omoplata locks the arm bent behind the back like so, the arm locked up in his legs, and what it does is it attacks the shoulder. So it can be a pretty brutal submission when you if you go too hard on it, for sure.
My arm.
Okay, so when he had that omoplata, he literally was grabbing the wrist with both hands and pulling it as if he was still trying to armbar him. Usually you don't grab the wrist with both hands within in an omoplata, but you could to force the omoplata to go further and further. The thing is though, you know, you hear like a break or whatever, and then he stands up, Triple H stands up, and he straightens out his arm. He's like, "You broke my arm," and straightens it out and pops it back into place as if he popped his elbow and broke his elbow. That's not what the omoplata attacks. It attacks the shoulder, you know, not the elbow. So that's a little bit unrealistic. So like when he got up, instead of like snapping that arm into place like that, what would have been more realistic if he freaking like, you know, like rotated his arm, Winter Soldier style, or, you know, straight up slammed his arm into a freaking wall, Mel Gibson Lethal Weapon style. That would have been way cooler. As far as the quality of the jiu-jitsu, you know, it's not bad. It's a little sloppy, and then of course the iffiness of the elbow being broken or whatever, that takes away a little bit. So I'd probably get maybe like a 6 or a 7. You know, it's not too bad.
Stop it! Please stop!
Nice. All right, so Vin Diesel is freaking raining down some heavy punches on Paul Walker, right? And Paul Walker does have his legs between him and Vin Diesel, so that pretty much is him establishing a guard. He has his guard. He's using it to kind of alleviate the power of those punches. And then when one of those punches comes down and his arm gets straightened out, he wraps up an armbar, actually wrapped up a triangle, and then switched to an armbar really quick. And it's a good setup when somebody's bringing down those punches.
She did it for you, Dom! She did it for you!
Now, once he locked up that armbar, Vin Diesel went power mode. He went freaking strongman mode, and he picked him straight up off the ground and bam, slammed him down. And that can be a legit way of getting out of an armbar. It's not the most technical way, you know, it definitely requires strength and power, but that doesn't mean that it can't work. He's strong enough to lift him up, he picks him up, boom, he slams him. It is a little bit of a risky move though, because you know, if you pick somebody up and you slam them and they don't let go, you're gonna get locked. You're still locked up in an armbar. It can be especially dangerous if you're locked up in the triangle choke, because if you're choking and it's already getting hard to breathe, and then you pick somebody up, all that oxygen that you use to lift somebody off the ground like that and then drop them down, you know, that can actually make you fall to sleep even faster. You can look at Carlos Newton versus Matt Hughes fight, where Matt Hughes actually slammed and he did knock out Carlos Newton, but he went to sleep in the process. So they kind of both went to sleep. But it can definitely work. I mean, Quentin Rampage Jackson versus Ricardo Arona, power slam. You know, so that's definitely something you have to be careful with when you're locking up an armbar or a triangle from bottom and the guy starts to lift you. Always be ready for the lift. And one thing you can do is when they start to try to lift you, you can take one of your arms on bottom and scoop underneath the leg, and that'll make it very hard for them to lift you off the ground, therefore finishing your move safely. I mean, it's clean. It's pretty good. There's not a whole lot wrong with it, so I'd give it probably like a 9, you know, 8 or a 9 out of 10. It's a good scene. So this whole fight scene's crazy, you know, I mean, they're floating in the air like that, and it's pretty awesome. And once he gets a hold of the guy, he wraps his legs around him in what you could probably call a guard. It's kind of hard to say whether it's guard or mount because they're floating in the air, so nobody's really on top of the other person. So it's a guard or mount. Now, it's a little iffy, the quality of that choke right there, and you know, whether or not that's even a real jiu-jitsu choke, a real choke period. It looks kind of similar to a box choke. There's another way that we use the lapel to do a choke that's kind of similar to what he was doing. But again, the lapel wrapping around the neck is much tighter than the arm wrapping around the neck. So I don't think that this is a legit way to put somebody to sleep. It's definitely a good way to control somebody and hold them for sure. But I don't see somebody going to sleep with this choke, and if they did, I definitely don't see them going to sleep in 2 to 3 seconds. This is probably a weaker choke. Very cool fight scene, cool control, very good control, especially floating in the air like that. As far as the quality of the jiu-jitsu, I would probably give it a 4 or 5. All right, so this is kind of similar to the Paul Walker fight. Gary Busey's on top. He was raining down some punches, and Mel Gibson throws up a triangle choke. Okay? And he's using that choke to stop the punches, and he's starting to squeeze to try to put him to sleep. You can tell Gary Busey is starting to have trouble breathing in the position. Now, I will say it's not the tightest triangle choke in the world. Usually when you lock up the triangle choke, which is your legs wrapping around the head and one arm like he has in the choke, you want to take the ankle and you want to lock it beneath the knee of your other leg. Anything less than that is going to be a lesser choke. So this isn't a super tight triangle choke, but it can there is a possibility that it's tight enough to make him go to sleep.
Break his fucking neck! Not worth it.
So he puts him to sleep. You do hear Murtaugh off in the distance saying, "Break his fucking neck." You know, you're not really going to be able to break somebody's neck with it. You can squeeze nice and tight, and even like moving your hips around, you can definitely cause some discomfort. But breaking the person's neck, not likely. And he doesn't. He doesn't break the person's neck. But it's a nice fight scene. I would probably give it a 7 or an 8. Oh crap, we got 2 Tom Cruises fighting each other. Nice, that was a pretty sweet setup. This is very similar to the Lethal Weapon scene that we just saw, but he added a little bit of extra flair in there. Tom Cruise is going to bring down a punch, and he used his foot on the bicep, which is considered like a spider guard in jiu-jitsu, to block that punch, which you could do, and then immediately threw the leg over and locked up a triangle. Now his triangle, his ankles are crossed. He doesn't have a full locked up triangle. It's not even as tight as the one Mel Gibson had on Gary Busey. So realistically, you wouldn't expect to be able to put somebody to sleep with this. However, you can trap them very well, and you can adjust it and hopefully, and maybe even lock up a tighter triangle, or you could even switch to an arm bar right here. So this isn't a bad place to be. It's a good place to be, but the triangle is not super tight yet. I wouldn't say it's tight enough to choke somebody and put them to sleep either. And he puts him to sleep. Now, maybe if you have really, really strong legs and you squeeze your thighs super tight, you might be able to create enough choking power to choke somebody with a loose triangle like that. But for the most part, you wouldn't even want to waste the leg strength. It would be more beneficial to spend a little time to pull that ankle and get a tighter triangle, and your choke would be way more efficient, way more likely to actually put the person to sleep. So I'd probably give it maybe like a 7. You know, this does bring to mind though a question. If you were to fight yourself, would you be able to tap yourself out? Because, you know, Tom Cruise was able to get himself in a triangle, so obviously his triangle attack is better than his triangle defense. Oh, I love this movie. All right, so the grappling happens real quick. Tom Cruise, he jumps up, he takes his back, right? And the other gentleman here, I forget his name, he drops down and he grabs Tom Cruise's ankle right between his legs and pulls it forward. That's a very old school, like, self-defense part of jiu-jitsu. Once he pulls up the leg, he sits down with what looks like a knee bar attack, but then immediately turns and starts grabbing at the leg and twisting it. Okay, so now that right there makes the move much more vicious. It's one thing to go for a knee bar and to straighten the knee out and bend it the other way. It's another thing to, as you're straightening it, to twist it. And that creates more of a heel hook effect, and it really just tears up that knee. It's a pretty vicious move. I would probably give this a good maybe 7 or 8. All right, so The Expendables, you know, it's a pretty intense movie. There's a lot of hardcore fighting action scenes in it. And they threw in a little bit of jiu-jitsu here, which was in the form of that crazy flying spinning armbar. Now, that move, I wouldn't say it's super realistic. You're really not going to see that set up very often. See, I'm not saying it's impossible for it to happen, but for the most part, you're not going to see it. But let's say he was good at it and he did go for it. Now, to hit that kind of advanced move, that tells me that you are highly skilled at grappling, right? Now, the problem I have is as soon as he hits the move and he lands, he's going for this armbar on Stone Cold and then immediately takes the leg off the head and Stone Cold comes up and escapes. So he doesn't have the armbar for more than a second or two and then Stone Cold escapes. So I think that's a little bit unrealistic for him to be that highly skilled to hit that advanced of a move, but not have the skills to maintain the armbar at the very end long enough to at least, you know, break an arm. I would probably give it maybe like a 4 or 5, and I'm only going that high because it did look really cool when he went for it. So Van Damme goes for a kick, that dude catches it, and then he steps in with his other leg, reaps the leg, boom, takes him down. Nice takedown. Now, as you can tell, that dude has his hand on Van Damme's throat, and he's still trying to choke him. Now, the problem with that is Van Damme, the way he lands, he has guard. He has his legs between him and his opponent. And that guy, because he's still trying to choke him, you have to be careful when you're trying to choke somebody inside their own guard, because that means your arm is extended and straight right out in front of your opponent. And what does that mean? That means that the person on bottom can start attacking arm bars and triangle chokes. So right here, as you can tell, Van Damme, he took his left leg and he swung it around the head. And now you can see that he's straightening out that arm. And he's straightening it out to the point to where he's going to try to get that arm to pop or break. The armbar itself, it wasn't as perfect as it could have been. He did throw the leg over the face, but normally you want to kind of swivel your hips so that you can pinch your thighs on the arm that you're attacking. And it keeps his arm locked in place so that while you're trying to straighten the arm and break it, he can't just rip his arm free. As far as what I would rate this scene, I would probably give it a 6. Very nice, very nice. So like, I really like this fight scene right here. Sharon Carter was really freaking bringing it to these dudes, and this move that she's using right here, you know, she grabbed the arm and then she brought her elbow over and basically dropped her armpit onto the guy's shoulder, laying him down to the ground while at the same time straightening out the arm for a type of armbar. And being that the guy had a knife, it is a really good technique for something like this because it completely isolates that hand, keeping that knife away from you while you're doing this armbar. And because of the position and him getting smashed to the ground the way he is, it makes it very difficult for his other hand to be able to reach and get the knife out of that hand. So it's definitely a legit technique, and I really like it. The only difficult thing about this position is if you're looking to use this armbar to actually break the arm, it can be a little bit difficult because normally when you do a regular armbar, you pull with your arms and you use your hips to thrust and create way more power to break an arm. Right here, the hips aren't involved. And see, she didn't break the arm. What she did is she held him in that position long enough to get the knife out of his hand, immediately turned towards his back, and boom, stabbed him right in the back. Really cool fight choreography. Okay, so that scene is kind of funny, you know, like because at 1 second, you know, she's fighting this dude, and then they cut to Falcon and Winter Soldier, and then they cut back, right? And then all of a sudden, she has this dude locked up, not just in a triangle, but in a reverse triangle, and it looks like she ends up putting the guy to sleep. You can't really tell because it immediately cuts to something else afterwards, but the problem I have with the scene is the reverse triangle itself. While the reverse triangle is absolutely a move, it's a lot trickier to get into a reverse triangle than it is to get into a regular triangle. And what's funny is it just all of a sudden shows her in a reverse triangle. It doesn't show how she got into it. And like that's a little bit unrealistic because I'm curious. I want to see how she got into it because that move's not easy to get. So it's a little hard to rate it, you know. With that being said, I probably rate it at about like a 7 or 8, you know. I mean, because it's a pretty badass fight scene, and the fact that you can't see the setup means I can't hate on the setup because I never got a chance to see it. So you can't hate on something that you didn't see. And that's it, guys. I hope you had fun watching this video. I hope you had fun watching me rate these jiu-jitsu fight scenes in action movies. It was a lot of fun for me. I will try to make some more videos, but thank you for watching this one. And make sure that you support our upcoming tournament. Go to turtleguardtournaments.com for the information as far as registration or even how much it costs to just come and watch the event. But thanks for watching the video, and I will see you soon.